It's Jared from Strongroots Farm. We're back with another pasture management video. In today's video, we're going to talk about what apparently is a controversial conversation. Should you mow, clip, or bush hog your pastures? Now, I'll tell you, I've been a pro bush hogger, mower, whatever you want to say, my entire life of farming. That's just how I started. I guess it was because I thought it made the pastures just look nicer, and I saw the pros and cons of it. But on YouTube and Facebook and some other forums, apparently this is a controversy, and there are some people that I respect that say I'm doing it wrong, so I created a test. This has been a year-long test. Today you're gonna see the results because I wanted to know, should I be bush hogging after I graze? Take the cattle through, they graze it down. Should I come through and top it and cut it down the rest of the way, what they leave behind? Or should I just simply let it go? So recently in my videos, I've been criticized for talking too much and wasting people's time. So here's the results. This is not mowing, and this is mowing. So if you want to know how I did this test, the whole parameters of it, I'll take you through what to do, the pros and the cons, what I think about bush hogging or clipping or mowing versus not doing it, what I think has worked best for us, show you why, show you the demographic. If you want to hear me talk about it, stick around. I don't know, people complain about different things. It doesn't matter. I'm not offended. Thank you for the comments. And long-windedness, I guess I am, it's who I am, but I try to give the pros and cons with our video, and that's the same thing I'm gonna do today as we get into this topic. All right, so to give you a scenario, we're gonna be going over here through the woods here. There is a specific field that we have, about 1.5 acres, and what we did was we roped off paddocks north and south, and that's how we moved through. And so this 1.5 acre paddock was grazed 4 total times. At sometimes we got 5 days out of it. We would get 5 different individual paddocks out of that pasture. We call it the back. This is what my kids call it. And other times when the grass wasn't growing as well in the heat of the summer or really late in the fall when we grazed it, we got 3 paddocks, so 3 days worth out of that pasture. So as we set this test up, it was the same exact pasture the entire time. Same cows. We were running around 24 to 25,000 pounds of live weight animal. That was 32 head, bull, cows, calves, everything together. All of our butcher calves that were a year old, wean calves, they were in the same herd. Because we're small, we like to keep one herd. We moved them through all at the same time in the same paddocks as they were moving, depending on the amount of days. The water was in a random position. Everything throughout the test was exactly the same for the same pasture, other than as we would take them out of the total pasture. So 3 to 5 days later, after they grazed, we would bring them out and we would bush hog the south side. So once again, my wire was going north and south. We moved them east to west across. We bush hogged east to west the south side of the pasture, and we split that pasture in half. And so we had to look at the difference in weed control and the difference in yield. Now, to be fair to an actual scientific test, we did not do a very good job of weighing. I should have taken a yard by yard plot, mowed it down tight, picked it up and weighed it. And so we could tell the yields from the difference of clipping versus not clipping. We did only observation. I should have weighed it so it was subjective. So our observations were that the clipped side, because we had given it 45 to 60 days of recovery every time, the clipped side had the exact same amount of forage weight-wise, if not more, than the non-clipped side. What we did notice in our observation is that the grasses in the clipped side were better. More orchard grass, more clover, less weeds. Now, it was not like this in the very first rotation because we were starting with the same blank slate. So the second time we came through, it wasn't as noticeable because it was still early spring, but by the third time, the cattle would go first to the side of the paddock that we had clipped and then meander back. There were still good grasses on both sides, but we saw a big change in the amount of weed pressure and then eventually the weight of what was there protein-wise. So there were much less of our orchard grass and clovers on the non-clip side, which is what was forcing our cattle to go over to different, better palatable items. This is easily now the worst pasture on our entire farm, the section that we did not clip. So we're gonna go take a look at it, but I want to talk a little bit later here about the pros and cons, what you should look for, and the different styles of grazing. Because there are going to be people that say, if you have to clip, it's because your cattle are not tight enough. And I'll go through that in a minute. I'll let you know the scenario of what we're doing and why we do some of the grazing techniques that we do. This is the 1.5 acre pasture. This is the side, obviously, that we did not clip. The south side over on that side is what we did clip. And you saw that in that opening part there. Orchard grass, much more prevalent. Clovers, much more prevalent. What happens is when you don't clip, you leave room for the weeds and unpalatable forages to grow that they left behind. So if they come through, if they're not eating everything down to the nubs, what is left will grow more prevalently than what they took. And over time, what will happen is you'll end up with a field like this that's really a lot of weeds. Now, they're still good forage. You can tell they've been foraging. They've been in here for 3 days now. This had thick orchard grass, thick fescue, and some clovers down in the bottoms. But the forage level, the amount is just not here anymore because the ironweed has really plugged itself in tight. And we're going to bush hog all this down to rejuvenate this pasture very quickly. But this is what happens when you don't clip. Okay, so we want to talk a little bit about the guys who say it's because you're not packing it in tight enough. And that could be true. We are essentially total grazers. We would consider ourselves more on the total grazer side of things as we graze than we are more of a selective grazer, that whole Greg Judy, take a third, leave a third, impact to hurt third kind of a thing. The reason being is that we kind of lean, we're total grazers that lean a little bit into selective because of the one herd. So I have in the same herd my cows and my calves, which is fine to do total grazing with, but then I also have my yearlings that we are fattening for butcher, my steers and heifers that will eventually become our meat. So with that, our paddock sizes are a little larger, and we like to have a little bit of selective grazing so that we get good daily gains on those animals. Now, our paddocks, we typically do daily moves during the heat of the summer like this. When grasses are kind of just growing steadily, we do go back to 2 a week moves. So every 3 to 4 days we move. And that has been a good, consistent thing for us because it saves us on labor and it helps us to move through in areas that have shade. So we give them a bigger paddock, but every paddock has some sort of a shade, whether it's our shade structure or in the woods, kind of like I'm standing here today. So we'll do a pasture walk here in a second so I can show you some of the differences in the quality of pasture and what you can gain by clipping. But first I want to talk about, do you have to clip like we did? We clipped every time. Every time that we grazed, we went back with that test and clipped. We don't do that all the time. In fact, we try to clip once, maybe twice a year. If we have a rainy year, kind of like this year is going to be, and we see the weeds coming in more, we'll clip twice. So I typically don't clip early in the year. My first graze through that we go through, and we do our whole farm in like 45 days. I don't graze after that because it's so early, the weeds haven't really come up through everything that's prevalent. And sometimes not even on my second rotation. I kind of watch the weeds to decide, okay, if they leave, if we move out and I see weeds, mainly ironweed, some ragweed, those are our 2 main problem childs here on our farm. If I see those weeds and they're standing taller than what was left, I'll go through and clip. So let's go through pros and cons real quick of clipping versus non-clipping. And so the obvious cons to clipping is fuel, time, equipment. You have to have a tractor or a mower of some sort to go out and clip. You're going to spend that time on that piece of equipment. And why should you do all that? Why should you do that effort? And that's what people are going to talk about. And that's why they say, don't mow, don't clip. Another con that I've heard that I completely disagree with, but they'll say that you want to leave that forage lay there so it puts more energy into the ground. By clipping it, you're clipping off a piece of grass that could have been a solar panel to put energy in the ground. I completely disagree with that statement because I believe even if it's a good, let's say a clover, a good piece of orchard grass that's up there and healthy and they just didn't get it, even if I clip it off, yes, I maybe put less energy into the ground because of that solar, but I'm feeding that soil with what I clipped. So you're feeding the soil with the weeds that you're clipping and even with the good grasses. So I completely disagree with that statement. I have not seen that to be true. I haven't even read that in a really good study that says that is the truth. So I don't believe that's a con for clipping. Go to the pros for clipping. Weed control is the best one, and that's a main reason that we do clip here. It is pasture improvement, okay? So yes, it takes time. Yes, it's mechanized. Yes, there's impact on the soil, but for the vast improvements that we get, our total pasture, what it looks like after, is far superior because we clip. So weed management is by far the #1 reason to clip. Another reason to clip is why I kind of started was beautification. It just helps our farm to look a little nicer. Now, your farm doesn't have to look nice for your cows. They don't care. As long as the grass is high quality, they really don't care if the fence lines are weed and all those things. But if you run something where you give farm tours, where you're using kind of agritourism on your farm, bird watchers, whatever that would be, maybe that is a little more prevalent for you and beautification should count. When I was young and didn't know a whole lot and was just getting into kind of grazing with cattle, it was important to me, not so much anymore, but there is a pro there. The other pros that I see is it helps to feed our pasture. So they talk about green manure. So you can see a cover crop or cutting even pastures down. When you cut that grass and you feed it back to your pasture, it's essentially not the same, but it's essentially like putting fertilizer on your pasture. You're putting that grass clipping back down at the base of the soil for then the earthworms to eat the decaying grass that is dying off. Two, it's covering the ground. So it's not leaving that bare spot. You're putting that grass on top of. And the third thing would be seeding. So as you're clipping, anything that they didn't get that is good, so whether that is orchard grass or clover buds and those kind of things, and I look for that as much as I look for weeds. So when I'm clipping weeds, I don't want it to go to seed. I want to clip it before it starts to bud. Before that ironweed purple flower comes on, like we're about 2 weeks from that pasture you saw, before that comes on, I want to clip it because I don't want it dropping seed. On the other side, I want to look at my clovers. Are half of my buds that was left, are they brown? Are my orchard grass, can I pull the seeds off of the good plants? Clipping will then drop and scatter those seeds on your pastures. So if you have bare spots, they're now seeded because you clipped, and hopefully some of that grass clipping went into those bare spots and produced a covering for it so the good seeds can come up. So we're gonna do a little pasture walk here. I'll show you some stuff and show you what the difference in clipping and mowing can do. And we've actually got another little test right where I'm standing here. So we sectioned off, without making you dizzy, from this watering point over here. We went out a square and then came back to this fence over here for this paddock specifically. And what we did in this paddock is we grazed it and then we bush hogged it. And so you can kind of see a little bit that there's remnants of grass mowed down. They did graze. There is some manure, but the weeds, the ironweed is snapped off or really chewed. Probably need to sharpen my bush hog blades, but we mowed this down with the bush hog. Whereas over here, same field, it looked the same in the beginning, we baled this. I mowed this tight about a week ago with my baler, or with my mower, and then baled it up. So everything was gone down to that 3-inch mark. We do not cut hay super tight here. I like my grass to come back and recover faster. Yes. Am I leaving some forage out there that we could be baling? Yes. But we try to mow to 3 to 4 inches. I do not cut down tight against the ground like some of my neighbors, and even the guy that I bale with, he likes to cut tight because he puts fertilizer on and he doesn't graze where he's baling. So this was mowed with the haybine mower. So this will be a future video, maybe next year even, but this will be a little test that I'm doing about mowing for hay. So do I just take that choice? This had some weeds in it. It had been grazed twice already this year. Technically this hay would be second cutting hay, the way it looked, and I didn't bush hog it at all. So we chose to graze twice, let it grow up and mow for hay. And so I want to see the difference in mowing for hay on my second graze versus mowing or grazing and then bush hogging it down. I want to see the difference in those two types of things. Now this got grazed twice. That paddock there that we mowed with the bush hog, that was the third grazing on that. So we're getting one less grazing here, but we got in this is probably 3 acres, 3.5 acres. I got 9 round bales off of this, and it had been grazed twice. Now, as we come down to our line here, this is where we just talked about we baled. This pasture here, holy clover patch. Look at that, my gosh. This has been grazed once this year, and then we baled it. So we grazed, I did not bush hog, I did not clip. We come in and baled this as our first cutting, and this is what has grown back in about 3 weeks. So we've got significant rain, significant growth back. I am tempted to go find a square baler, and we don't own one, but if I could borrow one, this would be $10, $12 a square bale for horse people. This clover is unbelievable thick. There's orchard grass, there's fescue, there's chicory, there's some other things in here. There's 3 different types of clover, and then there's even some alfalfa sporadically through. Do have a little bit of weeds. Don't know how much you can see them. They're sporadic. Some of the ironweed here, hit and miss here. But this field is thick, and it's all because we cut everything down tight now. This is because we're grazing and baling on the same farm. Here in a second, I'm going to show you where we have just mowed and grazed only, no baling and no taking off nutrients. But this has recovered great, and this is what your pastures can look like, and we can come back in and graze this, or I can let it go and bale it again. So we haven't made that decision yet, but this is what we're looking at now. This pasture here has been grazed twice this year, and after the second grazing, we come in and bush hogged it. So it's never been baled, but this is what we were grazing while we were baling over there. So we ended up in this section, we grazed the front half of our farm, the east side of our farm, and then this is where we were grazing. So you can see comparatively for where we cut and mowed hay versus where we were grazing, this is probably a week behind that. So after they moved out of here, we bush hogged this down. That field had been cut for a week to a week and a half. So we're a week behind that over there. Forage wise though, it's very different. The clover is a good level for grazing. There's tons of grass out here, good orchard grass regrowth. There's more fescue on this side than there is over there, but it's more of an even mix of pastures because we came in and cut everything at a 6-inch, maybe even 8-inch height. I put my bush hog up pretty high and just kind of topped everything versus cutting it to that 3 to 4 inch that we do with our mower for baling hay. So when you can see the difference here. There's still a little bit more weeds than there was over there because we didn't cut it as low, but we have an overall good mix. So perhaps cutting a little tighter would help the weeds to get even lower and allow those grasses to jump back up with their energy and smother out those weeds. Not bad weed pressure, but just a little more. Our last paddock, this paddock here, it's actually several paddocks, but this area here that we're looking at, we've actually grazed this 3 times this year, and I've mowed it once. So we started the pasture grazing here early in the season. We grazed it the second time, and this was being grazed as we were baling the fields that you saw just a bit ago. So this one, compared to what you saw, the clover fields, this has about 2 weeks behind. We're about 2 weeks behind each other because we were grazing through here. And what I saw, comparative to what you just saw, was that I saw the evidence of the weed pressure from that 6 to 8 inch bush hog cut versus the weeds were almost completely gone with that 3 to 4 inch cut that I was using with my baling mower. So what we chose to do in this section was to lower our bush hog down. We grazed it a little tighter with our cattle. We still moved them across, just squeezed them in just a hair tighter, and they still got a good enough grazing. But then I went through and I put more grass down because I lowered my mower and let more lay down. What I can see is that the weed pressure significantly better than the pasture you just saw. And you can actually see the line over through here. There's a line of weeds that are just not prevalent here. Now, we're a little bit behind it. Could they still come up? Yes. But the grasses are much stronger here than the clovers are. Is there still a good mix? Yes. You can see plenty of good red and white clover coming in. They're lower, they're weeks behind, or at least a week and a half behind. But our grasses are much more even throughout in this pasture. and the weed pressure is much less because I dropped that blade, that height of that bush hog down. Now, as we finish up here, this is one of our Silvopastures. They were just grazing in here a week ago, and you can see there's quite a bit of forage left on the ground. I cut all my Silvopastures at 6 to 8 inches, and I think I'm gonna remain to do that. Even if I get a little more weed pressure, I do that because all of the water on the farm runs towards my Silvopastures. My Silvopastures have ended up being the area around the waterways and creeks that run through our property. And so to mitigate any runoff, if there would be any, I have pretty thick pastures, I don't have that problem, but I tend to let these grow a little thicker just for that. And because the grass just needs to root so much more, they tend to lay in these shaded areas more. Even when they're grazing in these pastures out here, we let them back graze or come into these shaded areas so that they just have less energy being burnt because of the heat. And so this area kind of gets a little more impact than everywhere else. That's why I'm gonna choose to kind of keep that 6 to 8 inch cut on my bush hog. But this is what it looks like. 5 days ago, I bush hogged this. This is kind of what a 6 to 8 inch cut looks like. So that's a pasture walk. So what does all this mean for you, and how can I give advice to help you out? First off, if you graze similar to us, where you want to have some selective grazing because you're looking at daily gains because you're raising beef, whether that's you're buying calves, stockers, and you're fattening them out to take them to butcher, or you have a cow-calf herd and you also are trying to get them fat as far as the calves and everything in the same herd like we do, I would recommend to do what we do. Pack them in tight, keep moving them. Daily moves are better, but if you have a trouble like me with having enough time to get everything done, you can go to that twice a week moves like we do at certain times of the year. When it's wet, when it's rainy, we move daily. We don't want to create damage in our paddocks. If we ever see damage in a paddock, we move them. Even if it doesn't have enough days, even if there's tons of grass still left out there, because we want to minimize the damage. But if it's dry and you can do twice a week moves and not cause damage to paddocks, that is a good recommendation. I do like that to help save you some work. After that, you're going to want to look. Are there weeds in the pasture? If there are, clip it. Set that baler, set that bush hog down. You can go about as tight as the maximum that they grazed. So if parts of your paddock are grazed to the nubs, meaning they were hungry and they ate it down, they took more bites than just one out of that grass, which is fine, more of a total grazing approach, that's where you want to drop your baler or your boat mower down, your bush hog, whatever you're cutting with. Even if it's a side-by-side or a zero turn, whatever kind of mower you got, that's the height you're shooting for, the max that they graze down. You want every grass to be on the same playing field as they come back. And that's kind of where I choose my heights with it. So if they're just grazing it down to that 4 to 6 inches and it's perfect grazing, but there's some weeds that are taller, cut it to 4 to 6 inches, top those weeds off. Once, twice a year should be all it would take. And you will help mitigate weeds and improve your pastures without chemicals. That's what I recommend you do. You can even clip a little lower than that like you saw, and it helped to prevent them coming back. If you're clipping in the heat of summer, clip just a hair lower. Give yourself good days of rest, 45 at minimum, but I recommend 60 to 90 if you can, if you have enough property, and then that'll help your weeds to not come back. Now, you always have some weed pressure. I've never been zero weeds without spraying. I've seen zero weed fields, and it's because of chemical interventions. We don't do that here. So if you're trying to do it without chemicals, this is the best way I know how. Now, what about if you're a cow-calf herd only? You have cows, they produce baby calves. When they wean, you sell the calves off, and that's how you make your profit. I would do something different. So monitoring the grass is still about the same. You still want to watch, are there weeds when you leave, and you can clip those things. But for the most part, if you have a cow-calf herd only, 1, and 2, they are in good condition, meaning they're a frame score 4 or 5, they're fatty, you can't see their ribs, okay? They're getting full every day in that divot in front of their right hip. If their hips are full, you have a good conditioned animal as a mama cow. Then you can pack them in tighter. Their hoof pressure, their tightness as a herd will smash a lot of these weeds down. That ironweed does not have to be cut. It can be stepped on and snapped, and it will die off just the same. So that's what I would do. I would try to pack them in tighter, move them more often. If you come in to a high density weeded pasture area, pack them in tighter, move them more often, and you might not have to clip. Or if you're looking to save labor, do the 3 days and know that you're gonna have to spend 2 or 3 hours on a bush hog, depending how much your land is and how big your paddocks are. You're gonna have to mow that down. Maybe if you have a kid that can do that. Maybe if somebody else in your family can do that. That's a job I like to give to my children as they've gotten to be teenagers. They can bush hog for me. I do the outer edge, a couple loops, keeping them away from my fence, and then I can put them on there and they can save me time and they enjoy that. What about if you're really small? You have 2 or 3 head, that's it. Maybe a dairy cow and 2 beef calves. What do? Well, obviously your paddocks are gonna be much smaller. You're not gonna be able to rotate daily with 3 head, is my opinion. I hear people try it, but I don't think they can eat enough and eat it fast enough in that tight of an area. That's a really teeny tiny paddock for just 3 head. So my advice is to try to go to a once or twice a week move and then do that same exact thing. Move it, and then I would clip it all the way down at that point, because that means they're so tight, there's gonna be a lot of manure, and you're probably gonna have to figure out something with shade. How do you shade cover them without, making a muddy spot with only those 3? Because if you just let them graze a quarter of your farm, you divide your farm into 4 paddocks and you just let them graze until it looks thin and then you move them on, eventually it's gonna become all weeds and the nutrients aren't gonna be good in there. So if you're doing that, you definitely need to clip after. That's just my advice. But paddocking them in a way that you can move them in small sections. I have a friend that does this. He simply mows with a 0 turn pulled all the way up at that point, because his paddocks are literally 25 by 50 and he moves them every 3 days. If that's how small you are, that is fine, but I do recommend mowing and just making sure you record dates of when you're in these paddocks and try to stay out of them at least 60 days until the grass is recovered. What does that mean? So early on, as I was learning about overgrazing and what is recovered, when you look at this grass, there's quite a bit of grass here. There's 8-12 inches of height in this grass. And I thought, well, that means it's recovered. There's plenty of forage here for them to eat. What you're looking for on good recovery is these tips, okay? So as you look at the tips of the grass, now these are all chewed off, okay? So this is kind of chewed because it was the bush hog, but they're squared off. They've had bites out of most of them. When it's fully recovered, everything will have a point on it. The point of the grass will be back, and you'll look that everything has completely recovered it back into a normal grass shape and having a point on it. Now, even if all of your grasses have recovered and come to a point, that does not necessarily mean you have to be back in grazing. You can let it get height and hopefully some width on the blades, but you should not move back in until your grasses are back in a point, and that's a good way to test if you don't understand when can I go back and graze that point again. Well, there you have it. I hope that video helped. I hope the pasture walk was beneficial as we went and I showed you different areas, talked to you about how we were clipping at different heights and what it will produce in the end. And ultimately this video was about, is clipping mowing your pastures beneficial? I hope that is very evident to you with our tests, okay? The way we graze, and I think that's a huge part of it, the way we graze here on our farm, clipping pastures is very beneficial. So to give the guys credit who say you don't need to do that, there's a few different reasons other than they just think it's too much work that I believe guys do this. One is that they graze tighter and they only run cow-calf herds. So that's one thing, and I would agree with those guys. As long as they can keep their weeds down and they can pack them in tighter, you can do it without clipping. The other reason is some guys don't care about the weeds because their grazing ground is so cheap, a third of the price of mine, that they can just get more land and still graze their entire herd. I can't deal with that. Ultimately, I hope I was fair to those guys because I'm not. I respect a lot of them. I've just seen through these tests and through my experience, I could almost predict what that result was gonna be before I did the test. I did it for one, the video, but two, I wanted to prove to myself that what I was doing right for years was working. I had seen it work in a micro scale, but I had never just completely shut it off to see how well it worked. So now you have it. Now you know what to do. Now you know that a bush hog or a mower or some sort is a beneficial thing to do on your farm. Even segregating a part of your farm off and getting a cutting of hay off of it can be beneficial to you. I have really come to enjoy the grazing part of my farm, baling part, and switching back and forth, getting more land to graze and bale. I don't just have hay land that we put fertilizer on and grazing pasture lands. It's all grazing and hay land. We try to rotate through that way. I don't get quite the yield because I'm grazing and baling that other guys are getting when they say they get this many bales per acre. But ultimately, over the time, I'm getting that because of the amount of forage that I'm putting into my cattle as well as baling. I have seen a benefit for cutting down tight and allowing grasses to grow up thick and overpower the weeds. Poor pasture management, though, can allow weeds to take over your farm, and it does not take years. It can happen in 1 to 2 years, and the recovery time is 3 to 5. That is my experience. If you don't manage it tightly every year, it will cost you 3 years of fighting it to get back where you were. Well, there you go. Thanks for watching. Please, if this is your first video, like and subscribe. I hope it helped you. I do get long-winded sometimes, but I'm trying to answer a lot of questions that people emailed me and show a lot of things in one video. So there it is. Comment down below. Tell me, do you think I'm wrong? Tell me if this video helped you. If you're gonna change the way you're doing something, I'd like to know it. I'd like to see your results as well. Until next time, keep grazing, and thanks for watching.